Archaeodeath with Professor Howard Williams, bringing the past to life, just in time for its own funeral. Welcome everybody to an Archaeodeath interview with myself, Professor Howard Williams, and my special guest. And my special guest I know primarily and first off through her TikTok channel as Alexandria Artifact, but I know she has a real name, and I'd like you to introduce yourself, Alexandria.
Yeah, so my name is Alexandria Petrocelli. I'm a public historian and training in nautical archaeology, and I am one of the co-founders and CEO of the Humanities Guild.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. And you know we've been doing a lot of deathly because this is Archaeodeath here. So, but you're not an Archaeodeathly person. But why I wanted to talk to you is not only because your research is super interesting and spans the ancient world and the modern world, the multi-period nautical archaeology history theme, but also because of your social media stuff. So I was really keen to have the more views I can capture about that. You know, I think it's really important to have those conversations about the values and challenges and your Humanities Guild as well. But I wanted to start off by sort of getting a sense of how did you get into the study of the human past, you know, becoming a public historian, but particularly getting into the old stuff.
The old stuff.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no, I was always fascinated by human curiosity as a kid. Curiosity and imagination, I think when you're a child, that's synonymous. There's no separation there. And I'm not necessarily convinced that there is as an adult either. We just don't admit it. But to me, like the timeline of how humans have interpreted and explored the world around them, whether that be through creativity, rituals, innovation, I it's this childlike wonder, and I think that is one of the most fascinating bits about humanity as a whole. But I didn't actually start my career in history or archaeology at all. Um, I actually started in humanitarian work. I worked with halfway houses and refugee programs, and I did a stint as a UN volunteer correspondent. And during that time, I wrote articles and did interviews with a nonprofit that worked with refugee children in Jordan, and they used play to help them navigate trauma. And it was, during that time that I really started to understand the importance of knowing the context of history in order to better understand our own humanity as well as systemic cycles that are, still at play today. So I quickly learned how to kind of incorporate that in with what I wanted to do. And I knew that the story of innovation and STEM mathematics, it's so limited to a Eurocentric view. And I really wanted to
Yes.
just push against that, especially through the Islamic Golden Age. I felt it was deeply important. And it's especially because STEM, the history of STEM is so constantly wound up in, this constant pushback against anti-intellectual movements.
Yes.
And so that was
Yes.
something that I really wanted to bring to the forefront through public history. So I went back to school in 2020 for archaeology. And when you get into archaeology, you have one or two options. You either hate it and leave, or you make it your entire personality. So very quickly, like nautical and maritime archaeology became my entire personality. And I've been diving, pun intended, headfirst ever since.
Well, I took a third route of staying, but because I didn't have any personality. But anyway, but anyway, but no, I know what you mean. And so I didn't realise you'd come back to education so recently. 2020 seems aeons ago, but also just
Yeah.
yesterday. So that's a bit of a surprise to me, actually. But I mean, so what are your main lines of research or inquiry to date? How would you sum yourself up? You said you do public history, but what's your main passions of interest? And
Yeah, well, I started studying Alexandria, Egypt, which I know sounds kind of narcissistic since it's my name. But it was, I started researching between the second century CE and then into the early fifth century CE.
oh,
We have this amazing representation in Alexandria where it's considered this, intellectual capital. And you have, like, in the second century, you have Ptolemy, the mathematician, not the ruler, who gives us this great foundation of physics and optics. But then when you span into the early 5th century, we find ourselves with Hypatia of Alexandria, who she was the lead mathematician of her time. And as a middle-aged woman, she meets her demise at the hand of an anti-intellectual movement. And you sit back and you think that when you think of Alexandria, you think of the great library and the great minds. And near the end of that, in the 5th century CE, all of that crumbles. It's a very long, spread out, crumbling brick by brick of it being an intellectual capital. But that really kind of marks the end. And I found that fascinating. And then as I started really training in nautical archaeology, I realized a great way to explain all of that to the public was through celestial navigation.
Oh, yes.
So
Go.
Oh, sorry.
No, go.
Yeah, so I primarily study that through the evolution of the astrolabe, which is this, I'm obsessed with it. If you're ever on my TikTok, it's all I talk about. It's this wonderful multifunctional analog instrument that we have pop up in antiquity, but it maintains its value into the 18th century CE, which is like blows my mind. I just think that's crazy. And we see it pop up in ancient Greece, but it's really during the Islamic Golden Age that this device is just perfected. And it was, it utilizes the horizon and the meridian for navigation. It utilizes the celestial sphere, which is, basically our space globe. It represents everything we see in the night sky. And you could use this to pinpoint your location, navigation, pinpoint where, celestial bodies were, but you could also use it to tell things like date and time. So it's really like this first handheld analog computer. And I'm obsessed with it. I think it's fascinating. It's what my research paper is on, is just the astrolabe. And my advisor is like, are you sure you want to do that? But I think it's a really great representation of this constant thread through history.
So where are you, when you say supervisor, where are you advisors? Where are you situated now? You're a postgraduate now, yeah?
So I'm working through the do you mind if we don't say where I'm going to school?
Absolutely, I won't.
Cool. Thank you.
I did. I'll edit this bit out. That's fine.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I've had a few online stalkers this week, so I'm trying to reel back information that I'm giving on the internet.
Yeah. Okay.
No, you're fine.
Would you, shall I ask something about your studying at all, or do you want to just leave that as your research and just leave it at that?
Yeah, if we could just leave it at that, that would be. Okay. Yeah. Well, thank you. Sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I was going to say, well, it strikes me, stepping back, that both of those themes, the sort of slow decline of Alexandria and the story of the astrolabe, both relate to the sort of problematic inheritance of the ancient world, these stories of decline and fall, and then of precious scientific survival, and both are sort of the dual sides of the myth of past versus present, of antiquity and modernity. And I wondered whether that's something the way you'd characterize your interest, or is that just me making something up that isn't there?
No, that's exactly it. I mean, what's really cool about the astrolabe is, so we have some astrolabes that they were made in the Islamic Golden Age, and they have Arabic on them, and later they're etched in Latin when it comes over to Europe. And I think it's this amazing visual representation of the dynamic influence that science and mathematics have coming out of the Islamic Golden Age. This isn't, we tend to research, especially with how we present it to the public, it's very boxed. You've got Europe over here and this over here, and everything is kind of, you get this idea that they're living in a bubble, and they're not. And one, that excites me, but two, there's kind of this disconnect between STEM and history. Something I hear a lot is stop studying and living in the past, get with the future. And it's important to know that, when they're talking about the future, they're thinking about innovation and technology. You have to know the history that came behind it. you have to know the nuances in order to not only use it responsibly, but in order to push it forward.
So both this interest you have push back against this various misconceptions, and it's pertinent beyond the academy. Do you feel, can I ask you straight up, do you feel like we are living in an age of anti-intellectualism, that we are fighting the good fight against either a rising tide or a steady stream or a persistent problem of sort of anti-intellectualism, where the past is either seen as irrelevant or is stylized by people with various jaunty comedy hats and helmets as something that is, based on completely outmoded and outdated conceptualizations?
Yeah, I think we are always fighting against a wave of anti-intellectualism. I think that when you have people who are pushing the boundaries, you're always going to have a group that's going to be pushing back out of fear.
Yeah.
And people in power often capitalize and weaponize those who are living with that fear.
Yes.
And that's how you get these anti-intellectual movements. And I think that throughout history, that has always been in the background, and I do think it is still in the background today. And I think we have more of a pulse on it because of things like social media, because of things like TikTok, where we are constantly in this public forum. There's no break from it.
No.
So, you can't ignore it at this point. So yeah, I would say that I think we are. But I think it's always been something that we have fought against.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because I think it's very easy to see it as just a thing of the last couple of years, but actually, you talk to older scholars who, say actually it's better than it was in export period. But yes, it's difficult to. There's a perception of it, but there's also, it's not going away, is it? That's the thing. And you mentioned TikTok, so let's talk about TikTok. I mean,
Yeah.
would you be willing to sum up your thoughts and experiences of you trying to do public history, doing engaging audiences with beyond the academy on social media or TikTok specifically?
Yeah, well, I think TikTok has become this amazing equalizer, especially with people who are in academia. And I think anyone who is engaging with the public through something like TikTok with history or archaeology, there's this real passion of getting your research out to the public. And so, when you put a bunch of academics together with a common goal, you end up creating this community that, boosts and networks and shares information. And from what I've experienced is at a surprisingly rapid rate. Every big opportunity that I have had within public history is because of TikTok. People coming across my page and connecting with me and sharing, a common goal. So yeah, it's incredibly important to me. I think it's powerful of what it does, not just as an equalizer between, us, but also in breaking down these barriers and this perception of gatekeeping that we often, get kind of put on us by those outside of academics.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
I think it's just so important. It's become a wonderful tool for well-sourced history and making archaeology accessible. And you have we already have this well-established format with documentaries. We know exactly
Yeah.
what we're
Yeah.
going to expect coming out of those. And in general, they have their place. And I think public history, though, through short form media and primarily TikTok, it gives you this added opportunity to add your special interest and your personality into talking about these nuanced topics. You can be bright and exciting, which is not something that you are usually afforded in, documentary format or within a seminar format or giving a lecture. And there's no rules to this creativity wise. I mean, I would argue that there's rules to this in forms of how you present your facts and how you present your sources. And I have a whole series on that. But creatively, you can be yourself. You can bring yourself to almost a forefront in order to engage with people who connect with you. And I think that is something that is extremely powerful within public history and public archaeology. It's not just giving a face to this research and allowing these topics to come to the forefront, but it's also humanizing it.
So I think a lot of your content is very much doing the dual role of presenting cool stuff and the underlying meta narratives of that stuff about the human past, but also reflecting on how we do it. As you say, you've done a lot of paid a lot of attention to accountability, correction, how we work, and that is part of that is about dialogue
Mhm.
across. And do you feel this is substantially different from other social medias you've experienced, or is this, do you think, just that you happen to be on TikTok, or what's your feelings on the distinctiveness of TikTok as opposed to anything else?
Yeah, I think the algorithm is the thing that sets it apart from other social media platforms. You have other social media platforms like Instagram that are trying to incorporate short form, visual storytelling and within that format of looking like a TikTok, but it doesn't act like a
No,
TikTok.
no.
There's an algorithm which, I mean, I know that my mutuals and I will complain about until we are blue in the
Oh yes,
face,
of
but
course.
the whole point of it is that you're getting fed things that you resonate with on what's called your For You page for anyone who doesn't have a TikTok. And you scroll through that, and as you interact, the algorithm learns more about what you like and the type of media that you resonate with, and it will push that more. Now, on the flip side of that, that means that allows a platform for misinformation, pseudo
Yes.
history, crypto history, and that's something that I think we spend a lot of our time debunking when we could be making there's other content we want to be making. But obviously, if there wasn't an impact, we wouldn't be doing this.
Do
So
you
I think that it is something that is a headache, but is also just a really great tool.
I still have changing views myself on how I work with the platform, and in relation to how much I want to spend my time correcting or commenting or criticizing versus just doing my thing. And that's true broadcasting, I would say, more, which I've done a lot more broadcasting on other platforms as opposed to responding dialogue on TikTok, because there's a potential of it turning very ugly very quickly. And I did a video yesterday about metal detecting and looting of early medieval sites, and I expected a lot of blowback, but I only got one, and everyone jumped on them and said, "No, that's not that's not the way it is. That's not what he said." And it was really positive. But there's always the fear of abuse, and I've had some big videos where it's been just pile on, and often from different directions, because people are misunderstanding you in 2, 3 different ways, and I'm
Yes, yeah,
simultaneously a white supremacist and a liberal snowflake and a apologizer for something else, or a sympathizer for something,
yeah,
and I'm going, how can I all in 5 sentences of dialogue, how can I be all these things? But that's what people hear, what they want to hear. They don't hear half, they don't understand half of what you say, and it can go so terribly.
mm.
And then there's the people who are just saying things, doesn't matter what you said, they'll just type the same things anyway. So it's difficult, isn't it? And do you feel obviously not an older white man, do you feel there are extra challenges to be faced by, in your experience of, because I think a lot of, say, female academics I know in the UK just don't go on any of this because they've experienced it, or they just are so dreading it because of the backlash they get for just being alive and female on the internet or whatever it may be. Do you get, what do you feel about those kind of issues, that kind of trolling and that kind of abuse, or just
Yeah,
lack of engagement?
yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. We spend a lot of time with the Humanities Guild, focusing on what we call defensive engagement, which is actually a term that I have stolen from Dr. Stormer, who's also a public historian on TikTok.
Yes.
But it's basically preparing for the worst.
Yes.
And as a if you are a female if you're female presenting and you are speaking with authority on a topic, you are going to get backlash. Now, the scope of what that's going to look like can vary depending on what you're talking about. I have experienced death threats. I've experienced online stalking. I've experienced people finding me on other social media platforms or like on my LinkedIn and sending me really inappropriate messages because, you know, I'm just an object to them and not all of this work and research that I've put into these videos. And that could get very hard. And I do not judge a single person for not wanting to engage on social media because it takes a lot. It takes a lot. And to think about things like doxing of them finding out, you know, your area of work if they don't like what you're saying. And,
Yeah.
you know, these things that we shouldn't have to be thinking about. And I do think that underrepresented groups in the humanities, so female presenting, LGBTQ community, BIPOC, experience it on a much higher scale. And, you know, how do you prepare for that? How do you tell people, hey, come on board, you should come and do this. This is really impactful.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think overall, if it was only that, I wouldn't be doing it. For every terrible commenter or you know, situation that I have like that, I will have 5 more of
Yeah.
a very large demographic of, you know, 13 to 45-year-olds being like, "Oh, I never heard of that. That's so
Yeah.
cool." Or, "I didn't know this woman in history existed. How I want to do what she did. I want to study what she did. How do I get in college for that?" And when you see that kind of impact and you're able to have those conversations one-on-one,
Yeah.
it, you know, it takes away from all of that terrible stuff that definitely comes with it.
I mean, I can tell you in a week on TikTok, I will get more positive comments and questions than a year on any other social media platform, even a decade. So, you know, in terms of
Mhm.
literally, I mean, I'm thinking of some other platform where, you know, I've done my blogging, I blog, it gets read, and so, like months later, someone says, "Oh, I really enjoyed your blog on that," but you don't get any immediate return, and it's an ego thing, but it's also, well, this is working, isn't it? People are interested. They're doing follow-up questions about you know, and yes, I think it's incredibly positive. I want to hear more about the Humanities Guild though, and as an initiative, what's the parameters and focus of that initiative?
Yeah. Oh, goodness, I love talking about this. The Humanities Guild is an organization that seeks to represent the underrepresented in the humanities fields through community advocacy and education. We have about, I want to say, 120 members right now.
Wow.
And about 90% of them engage on TikTok through public history and archaeology. And it right now our main focus is community. That's, you know, we're in phase 1 of our launch. We're a very new organization. And it's been really impactful. We my co-founders who is Anna Chitwood and Mandy Woods, we we started this because we found ourselves in a situation where we were invited to be part of something and realized that every single woman who was there to speak in the room was being spoken over by a man. And it was very, very clear to us that there wasn't a seat at the table. And that's something that underrepresented groups are it's a lie that's very much fed within academia is there aren't enough seats, so you need to fight for that one seat. And we decided, no, we're going to build our own table. If there's not a seat for us at that table, we'll build our own. So
Uh,
so that's
May
what we've
I
done.
have interest? Sorry to interrupt, but I
Oh,
was
you're
going to
fine.
ask: was that a metaphorical event, as a digital event, or was it actually a physical event where you felt talked over?
It was a digital event.
Aha.
Yeah. So it was a bunch of different archaeologists who were invited to speak on an issue, and every single woman who was there was being degraded and talked over or just full out ignored. So we started by just creating a safe space for these creators on TikTok who were there at that
Yes.
thing to just be able to talk with each other. And it became very clear that this was something that was bigger than we anticipated. So we um Yeah, with 120 members, there's constant networking, there's constant support, and it's a safe space to land when you are dealing with things like stalking and death threats. And we are expanding. So right now we are working on an educational platform, which will be development for your career, and teaching things about how to write a thesis argument, how to conduct an interview, these things that you may not necessarily be taught within your academic classes. So we're very excited for that. We think it's going to be extremely impactful.
And is it open to early career scholars as well as students, or is it primarily students or
Yeah, we have everyone from entering first year undergrads to people who have their PhDs and have been working professionally for 10 years. It's very multi-generational, and I think that that's
that.
where the impact really is felt, because you have these people who are more experienced in these fields coming in and being like, here's what worked for me. And you're taking so much of that red tape and that glass ceiling away when you have people who have more experience just coming with open arms and helping these people who are even just have an interest in their field. And I think that that is so beautiful.
That's really amazing. And this is a relatively new initiative by you and was it Mandy and Anna, wasn't it?
Yes.
And so there's a lot of potential for building in this in different directions, and it sounds really exciting. I mean, but also work, and so I suppose the challenge is knowing when you've got time to, you can't promise so much and then realize you can't fulfill it. But it's good to have that foundation. And yes, I totally agree. I mean, I think the assumptions of finite tables and space or whatever, and that you've got to constantly compete within those spaces when the option is actually no, thank you very much, there's perfectly nice piece of grass over there, or going outside to getting away from the tables, or wherever it may be, and in your case maybe a long ship or a trireme or something, so a nautical version, that you can go on a journey with other people without necessarily having to find a way in. I think that's a really important sort of space. Not every place has to have a Professor Williams, an old white guy or whatever it may be. It can, and that doesn't mean anyone's excluded. It's about creating spaces for different groups to build their skills, build their networks, and it's not exclusive either, is it? I mean, this is my sense of what you're saying. It's very positive in that regard.
Yeah. We is I think one thing that we were trying to get out is that it's not just for women. We're not exclusively a women's group, because cis males do have a lot more of the opportunities, and in order to create that safe space, we do not admit them into our community chats, but we have many allies, but our community as a whole represents female presenting, transmasc, non-binary, and it's spanning the scope of just so many different demographics.
Yes.
And I think that's so important.
Fantastic. And how do you think in the longer term, what do you think? I mean, I just wanted to ask, stepping back away from the Humanities Guild, what do you think of the wider potentials and challenges of academics using social media? I mean, despite us identifying challenges, there are positives too. But I mean, do you think there's some overriding, positives on the horizon, or is it all doom and gloom? I don't know. I have different views on this myself that change daily, but I'm interested in your take on the social media.
Yeah, I think it can go either way depending on how people begin to view it. So I know that personally, one of the major hurdles that I have found is people who consider themselves very strictly academic,
Yes.
think that it is a waste of time. Now, whether that is because of the difficulties you challenge, like that you find that are challenging, or whether they believe that it's a lost cause, which is what I hear the most. is,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
not worth it. It's no one's going to listen. Why are you putting in the time when, you could be doing this instead?
Yes.
I I think if that overarching opinion continues, then it will be, I think it could be detrimental for academia as a whole, especially in history and archaeology. I think that we're at a crossroads right now where, academics need to be engaging with the public more. And there has been that disconnect. And that's where public history has come into play. But I think we are at a time now where everyone is going to the internet for their information. If you want to combat misinformation, if you're wanting your research to be heard,
Mm.
you have to get on board. And you don't necessarily have to be a creator, but I do think that you have to be supportive of those that are.
Yes.
And I think, if that over time, I think it's a thing of proving. I think you have to earn that trust. And I feel that if over time, we can start being more supportive of these efforts, then goodness, the amount of impact that we can have, and I'm incredibly optimistic about what academia could do through social media.
Thank you for that very inspiring and positive take, because as I said, some days I feel slightly less than that positive, but so I feel very buoyed by your enthusiasm and your take on that. Thank you. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about while you're with us? Because I think we've covered all of the areas I had been thinking of discussing, but maybe I've missed something, or we haven't gone into the depth that you'd wanted to on anything.
No, and this has been incredibly fun. It's been so good to talk with you.
Well,
I love the stuff that you are putting out, and I think what you're doing is extremely important on TikTok and
oh, thank
through
you.
YouTube. So
Yay!
not to
Yeah,
make you
YouTube
blush, but
YouTube is the sort of the longer format, quite, it's a smaller account, but I think it's doing a job. And I'm amazed that people keep finding these interviews I've been doing with former students, ongoing, current students, or early career scholars, and are finding it useful both to see role models, see examples of people and their journeys. And yours is a really fascinating journey into academia quite recently, and
Mhm.
more recently than I realized. You had said some of that to me before, or I'd picked it up from your videos, but I hadn't realized how fresh and new to academia you are. But you know what I mean. I think it's really important people see the journeys people are on as individuals, and how passionate people are about not only studying the human past through different disciplines, but also then the communication of it. So thank you so much, and I hope that we'll put all the descriptions and the Humanities Guild in the put all the details in the description of this video, so that people can follow this up and find out all out about you and the Humanities Guild. But thank you
Thank
so
you
much
so
for
much.
joining us, Alexandra. It's been great
Thank
fun.
you. Yeah, thank you for having me. This is wonderful.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to Howard Williams on YouTube. In addition, consider following the Archaeodeath WordPress blog at howardwilliamsblog.wordpress.com.